On the front line, the Russians most often launch assaults in the Pokrovsk direction. There, the defense forces of Ukraine have already repelled 30 out of 36 attacks. In the Oxandripka sector, the enemy has been held back 12 times since the beginning of the day, in the Huliaipol sector 10 times. Our defenders are holding their positions in the Oxandripka and Lyman directions, as well as near Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region. According to Ukrainian soldiers in the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians keep advancing without pause. They usually do it this way. They advance on foot, sometimes sending in vehicles, and to protect those from our drone strikes, they cover them with grills and extra sheets of metal.
This really does make it harder to destroy them on the first attempt. But armored vehicles aren't just metal boxes. They have real weak spots. Often the task isn't just to hit a tank in a flashy way, but to stop it, to turn it into a stationary target, to make it so that it can't support its infantry anymore.
Last night, Ukraine struck a Russian experimental A-60 aircraft equipped with laser weapons in Taganrog. There was a fire at the Beriev aircraft repair plant, which services strategic bombers, and at the Atlantero facility, which produces Molniya strike drones. The Ukrainians use Baz jet-powered drones and cruise missiles. Neptune. They also struck an oil terminal in Novorossiysk, a center for Russian oil exports and the main base of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. The Tuapse oil refinery was also on fire. An S-400 air defense missile launcher was hit, as well as a large landing ship docked at the Russian naval base. During the attack, Russian air defense systems were actively firing at the civilian infrastructure of Novorossiysk. In the video, you can now see numerous hits from the Panzer missile system, striking residential buildings of the local population.
Meanwhile, Russia is gathering cannon fodder not only from its own national minorities and in African countries. It is sweeping up tens of thousands of Ukrainians from our temporarily occupied territories into its army. Every sixth soldier captured in Ukraine has a Ukrainian passport.
The figure cited by the Coordination Headquarters for the Treatment of Prisoners of War is simply staggering. To date, the occupiers have already forcibly mobilized nearly 50,000 of our fellow citizens to fight against Ukraine. And while pro-Russian forces are staging provocations against the territorial recruitment centers in territory controlled by Kiev, how do Ukrainians end up in the occupiers' army to fight against their own? Rostislav Sesoyev will explain.
6 a.m., occupied Berdyansk. Men are being seated on a bus near the military enlistment office. According to the authors of the video, Russians are forcibly conscripting local Ukrainians for the war. And this photo evidence is published by RBC Ukraine, citing their sources in the security services who report that Russians are sending new recruits from juvenile detention centers to the front. 48 such young men. In recent days, they arrived at the 9th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces. Most of the boys had just turned 18. In total, according to Ukrainian intelligence, 46,000 Ukrainians have been forcibly mobilized in the temporarily occupied territory.
Russia has a great many different tools for recruiting people into its armed forces. For example, they create situations where a person is held accountable criminally. And instead of criminal liability, this person is offered to go and fight in the so-called special military operation. Or for example, they create conditions where people cannot get jobs and they are offered contract military service because they have no other way to make a living.
Cases of forced mobilization in the occupied regions are being monitored by the Security Service of Ukraine. One such scheme was uncovered in Novoaidar in the Luhansk region. The organizers were a local official collaborator and a Russian career military officer. According to the Security Service of Ukraine, last year they carried out 2 waves of forced mobilization. Dozens of local residents were sent to the Russian army. These perpetrators have already been notified of suspicion in absentia.
And here it's worth reminding that in general, the involvement of residents of occupied territories in the armed forces and military actions is prohibited by the Geneva Conventions. They do this in order to exterminate the Ukrainian population. In fact, to exterminate the Ukrainian population in all forms, including through actual combat operations.
Our experts say that a real surge in forced mobilization in the occupied Ukrainian regions took place in the first months of the invasion. In the winter and spring of 2022, people were grabbed on the streets and taken from their workplaces to be sent to war. Now, the occupiers have changed their methods.
These are territories that have been occupied since 2022. Here, people are recruited exclusively through enlistment. Of course, there are some people who ended up there by force, but even then, they were forced to sign a contract and found themselves there. In other words, there is no so-called mobilization where people are taken from their homes and sent to the front. There definitely isn't any mass mobilization.
So, Ukrainians in the occupied territories are being offered money to fight on the side of the Federation.
They are being offered 1.5 million rubles, 2 million rubles, and the highest amount I personally saw in an offer. In the occupied territory there in Berdyansk, recruiters were offering 3 million rubles. And they were always hanging around there, so to speak, catching people to drag them in.
The Center for the Study of Occupation notes that currently locals have a choice to go to the trenches for money, to wait out the war under occupation, or to leave the uncontrolled territories altogether.
A man who ultimately ended up serving in the Russian military did so consciously and with full awareness of his decision. Because, at least throughout the entire year of 2025, all men who have passports,
all men who have foreign passports of the Russian Federation, these passports allow them to leave the territory of the Russian Federation and avoid being drafted into the military. If they decided to stay at home and wait it out and then ended up in the army, then their war, their personal war, is comparable to the filth of the Russian Federation that dragged them there. These things need to be called by their proper names.
In the Ukrainian Coordination Headquarters for the Treatment of Prisoners of War, it was calculated that every sixth captured Russian soldier holds a Ukrainian passport. Currently, efforts are being made to legally grant such citizens the opportunity to be released and remain in the country. The draft law is already under consideration in the Verkhovna Rada. Rostislav Sesoyev, We Are Ukraine Marathon United News.
Isil is just a few kilometers from the front line, where drones are lying in wait on the roadsides for Osago. In the area of fiber optics, where civilian vehicles can no longer enter, Ukrainians are being evacuated by the military.
They help load belongings quickly because shelling can start at any moment. And on the way, they keep an eye on the sky and destroy enemy drones. But is it possible to evacuate everyone who wants to leave? Reporting from Zaporizhzhia region, Sofia Moskalenko.
It was barely dawn outside the window. The servicemen are driving through an empty village in Zaporizhzhia as their mission is to evacuate people. Good morning. How are things here? But there's no time for long conversations. At any moment, shelling could start in Primorsk. First, they help an elderly man into the car.
Father, come on, let's go. You have to, Father, you have to, let's go. It's all right. Okay.
Then they load up the belongings. Over the years, the couple has accumulated quite a lot.
I'm taking these bags, the hot plate, I'm not sure, do we need it?
The hostess approaches the gate one last time and prays for the journey.
Lord God, merciful and almighty, we humbly ask, save us from Ukraine.
God willing. However, on the way out of the village, the soldiers suddenly pull over to the side of the road. They spotted the so-called Zajdun drone on a fiber optic cable. This drone detonated later, after the vehicle had already driven away. The Russians leave such drones along the road to launch surprise attacks.
It looks like a hat standing by the roadside. It flew in, landed, and just sits there. When a car approaches, it either takes off or explodes.
So the team of servicemen always splits up. Two ride in the back of the truck, keeping watch on the sky, with their weapons at the ready.
We were driving, the loitering drone was sitting there, and we spotted it from the back about 1.5 meters from the vehicle, so we started shooting at it. But it took off and flew away, so we drove, as they say, into the bushes, parked the vehicle, and then I saw that it kept flying and then just crashed. Also,
Another drone like that was spotted in Primorsk about 2 weeks ago. At that time, they were evacuating a family along with a woman with limited mobility. A drone on a fiber optic cable took off after the car, but the driver managed to get away.
The military at least have weapons, they can shoot back or escape. But if it's, excuse me, just a Zhiguli, then it simply doesn't have that capability. And there in the field, along the road, several civilian cars are already standing.
Of the most recent trips, the evacuation team says the one to Rishne stands out the most as the Russians had already shelled it with glide bombs. That time they had to evacuate a woman with her 12-year-old daughter.
It's terrifying to see what a child has to go through in such conditions at the age of 12. And in her eyes there was such such a look, as if finally I will be in more or less normal conditions in safety.
Often people have to be persuaded to leave because they worry about whether they'll be able to take their belongings or their pets with them. And even then, they refuse to leave their homes until the very last moment. These
People who stayed until the very last moment, they hoped that nothing would happen to them. And they're absolutely sure, like a shell hit that house right next to mine. The neighbor here was already killed, but they think they'll be spared. They'll make it through.
The police inform us who and where to pick up. Usually, it's a village that's already inaccessible by regular car. But the military vehicles are equipped with jammers.
The Zaporizhzhia direction is tough and there are really a lot of wounded, not just soldiers, but also civilians who are trying to get out. And the orcs don't distinguish whether it's a military pickup or a civilian one. They can hit an old man right on the road, someone who is just... After all, we drive there every day. We already know every turn, every alley where you can hide from an enemy drone.
Right now, because of the fog and rain, it's hard to scout the area, Anastasia explains. But they never refuse to evacuate civilians. They just prepare more thoroughly. From Zaporizhzhia region, Sofia Moskalenko, Yevgeny Lopatnichenko, we are Ukraine. Marathon. United News.
From the French Foreign Legion to the special unit Artan, our next story is about a Ukrainian who, long before the full-scale invasion, traded his job as a shop teacher at a school for the military uniform of the French Foreign Legion.
But when Russia moved on to a major war, he returned to Ukraine. Here, Franz is no longer just a legionnaire, but the deputy company commander in the special unit of the main intelligence directorate.
Salute, yes.
Suis Franz, je m'appelle mon service, dans le groupe Ratan. This is Franz, and the first thing you hear from him is a greeting in the language he learned during his 5 years of service in the French Foreign Legion. He went to serve there in 2017.
I looked it up on the internet and found information about the Legion. At that time, I was working at the school, and you can't earn much doing that. I wanted my own place to live and to see the world. So I went for this kind of adventure. I decided I'm going. I left. I liked it.
He knew French quite well, and when he joined the Legion, he encountered its harsh rules. During basic training, for 4 months, they were strictly forbidden to speak any language other than French.
That's the way it was. It lasted for 5 years. You come in, you're a soldier, a legionnaire, then a senior legionnaire, and there was a premier class. Then I was promoted to caporal, which is like a junior sergeant for us, I think. And I finished my service as a junior sergeant. They offered me to sign another contract to keep working. I said no.
I refused because of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Franz wanted to return home and join the Ukrainian army. I
Still had a contract when the full-scale invasion started. I was still under contract. I thought about deserting, going home right away, but I also talked to some acquaintances who at that time were serving in the armed forces of Ukraine. They told me, finish your contract, and if anything, it's better to help us from there. You know, with humanitarian aid, gloves, hats, boots, tourniquets, whatever people needed. And then, once your contract is over, you can come back with a clear conscience. And that's exactly what happened.
Franz didn't join Artan right away.
One day I ran into an old acquaintance who asked me if I had any plans. I said, I want to find a place to serve where there are good guys, where it'll be exciting. He said, come join us. I asked, and where are you? You'll see.
As part of an elite special unit of the Defense Intelligence, Franz became an assault trooper and took part in the hottest operations. His first baptism by fire after returning from the Legion was a rotation on the liberated Zmyny Island, which the Russians so fiercely and determinedly tried to reclaim once again.
There you see, just like that. Well, we destroyed everything we could there so that it would be impossible to stay on the island. Our task was to stay on the island. In the event that the enemy tried to retake it, we had to hold them back at all costs. Now Artant is raising funds for a pickup truck, and anyone can help. You can support via the QR code on the screen.
After Zmini Island, it was the Kupiansk direction. Here, the enemy was actively advancing, so we had to repel enemy assaults around the clock.
The operation I took part in back then, the assault actions, happened at night. One of our groups got surrounded in a patch of woodland. The enemy slipped between our positions, and we needed to drive them out so that our group of servicemen who were surrounded could rotate and switch out, because they had already run out of ammo.
During the rotation in the Kharkiv region, Franz's group also significantly increased Ukraine's exchange fund. In
Liptsi, we also carried out successful assault operations in the forested area. There was a rather large forest there with deep ravines. The terrain was inconvenient for assault operations, but it had to be done. When we carried out the assault, my group captured several prisoners.
the youngest Russian prisoner was 18 years old, Franz recalls.
I was very surprised. I asked him, "Why didn't you go to study? Why are you in the army?" He told me, "I'll be serving at headquarters. They won't send me to the front." I said, "You all have the same story. At headquarters or something else. In training."
Among other things, there were rotations to Zaporizhia and Donetsk regions. Service in hotspots did not go without consequences. At the positions in Chasiv Yar, Franz received a shrapnel wound to his leg from an enemy drone drop. At that time, the enemy was advancing in columns.
I spotted several columns with equipment. There were tanks, APCs. We were directly repelling assaults. At quite close distances to the enemy. That's about 20 to 30 meters away.
3 weeks in the hospital, a month of rehabilitation, then back to duty. He's still fighting. Between rotations, he trains and has no plans to leave the military.
After every mission, when we return, we have a short period of rest when we can go to our families, to our loved ones, relax and spend time with them. As our commander Titan says, family is the most important thing.
Finally, I ask, where is it better to serve, in France or in Ukraine? The answer is obvious, says Franz.
The French Foreign Legion is, it's nice to serve in an army that isn't at war with anyone. But here you're in a unit where you take part in combat operations. You are defending your own country. There's nothing to look for here. In the Legion, you work somewhere far away and then come back. But this is your home. Everyone here is family, and you are protecting them. So, no, it wouldn't be better.
Tetiana Demukh and Roman Hrebelnik. We are Ukraine, Marathon. United News.